Good afternoon, everybody. This is Kendra Cooke from the Core Training, and I just told Joshua I'm a little starstruck. This is Joshua Medcalf, and I have the honor of interviewing him today. As you all know, we've been reading Chop Wood, Carry Water. Now we're all reading Pound the Stone, and I told him I was really excited to interview him because I love his whole message of sticking to the basics and just grinding it out. And we're learning how to chop wood and carry water every day in real estate. So I'm excited to have you, so thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Let's start by just that. How did you get the fundamental to write the book of doing the basics, sticking it out? One of the things you say is it's 10% talent, 90% effort, all the things that we practice in real estate and lending. Where did that concept come from? Was there an experience that started this for you, or?
Well, I mean, the brand that I created is called Train to Be Clutch, and a lot of times people think that that was like a cool marketing campaign or slogan, and the truth is that that's just, in order to excel at anything in life, that's just what I've had to do. I've maybe had a little bit of talent in different areas, but I've always been questioned, counted out, last pick on teams, shouldn't have gotten into Vanderbilt or Duke based off of my grades, things like that. With my books, people have always said, you can't write. I got C's and probably D's in most writing classes that I ever took. And so in order to compete, not even thrive, I've always had to work harder and put in more effort and really just a lot of those unseen hours and a lot of that work in the dark. That's just been my life. And so I've seen the impact that it had in my life and what would, continually happen whenever I'd go from, like I did at Duke on the soccer team, being the last pick on the team, to finishing second in points, whether that was from, learning sports psychology and applying it in a lot of the principles that are in Chop Wood, or, just from, the hard work that is required. But that kind of pattern of starting at the bottom and then, finishing, much closer to the top and being much more highly competitive is a pretty consistent theme throughout my life.
I love it. One of my personal favorites that I want to make sure we cover today is the bamboo chapter. We're growing bamboo. And as a realtor, 27-year realtor, and now I'm a full-time coach with the Core, is we teach people that relationships take a long time. So we plant a lot of seeds on a daily basis, and then we have to water them and water them and water them. And a lot of us stop before the bamboo ever comes out or the relationship ever develops. So when you were writing that chapter, I thought you were writing it to me. And I feel like every day I coach people on that. So tell us, how that came about too. It sounds like it came from a long line of working your butt off. I'm not saying that, but how do you get past that? Like, I'm going to keep watering and nothing's happening. What keeps you from not quitting? Like you said, from Vanderbilt to Duke, and you kept pushing through that. What is that mindset like?
Well, I think it's probably different for everybody, but for the most part, I think that if you get too caught up in the end game, and I think that that's oftentimes the big issue, is that when people come to me, they immediately want to talk about their goals. They immediately want to talk about what they want. And so everything else then becomes them trying to backtrack and find a way to manipulate people or things to get the result that they want. And so much of what we talk about with our personal clients, or whenever you get into the real meat of like our real books and not our fables, is what we call, and talk about is your heart posture. And that most of the time you need some real authentic heart posture shifts. And if you're just trying to use strategies to get stuff out of people, whether that's selling houses or selling trinkets or whatever it is, people are always going to be able to feel that. And so I think that one of the most important things is that you want to be doing something that you have a love for and you have a passion for. And if you'll focus on really trying to impact other people's lives and not making it about yourself in that process as much as you can. And like, I don't want to sound like I'm, some great person, but I've just seen this over and over again, that if you're really in it for yourself, you're really gonna struggle. And I'm a selfish person, but that's like what team sports did for me, is I realized, like, what do we need to do to win? What do I need to do? Do I need to sweep the shed? Do I need to, to be the water boy? Like, or do I need to score goals? Like, what do I need to do to help us as a team and to really get outside of myself? And I'm really grateful for team sports, because that really helped me get over a lot of myself and my ego. And I think that today what you see is you see a lot of people that, well, I'll just put it this way. Most of the people that win today aren't really that concerned with the money. They aren't really concerned with the accolades. They aren't really that concerned with the stuff. They're doing what they love to do, and that usually is in some shape or form helping and serving other people. And they've done that enough and consistently enough, and then so many other things just end up falling into place whenever there's more of a pure heart or pure motives behind it. And just the truth is that most of us, when you really strip everything away, our motives are incredibly selfish. And so whether you realize it or not, that energy transfer is going to be there, and the likelihood of somebody going with you or choosing you, you're going to want somebody in your corner that you can actually trust. And if you're not really forthright, and if that really isn't your heart posture of trying to help and serve, then people are going to feel it.
Oh, I love that. So kind of a couple things that came out of that for me is you got to love the game. You play for the love of the game. And another thing that I heard in there is that when you help other people get what they want, satisfaction, fun, whatever, they'll help you get what you want, which is you get to play, or you get to perform, or you get to sell, or whatever it is you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
So taking that a step further, I'm from Tennessee, so you mentioned Vanderbilt earlier. I live in North Carolina now, so you mentioned Duke, so I'm kind of connected to you in a couple other ways too, besides your books. But I'm sure that the people listening to this podcast are thinking, how did you pick those mentors, or how did you pick those places? Were you following a coach? Were you following a trainer? Were you following your passion? And if there was some mentors and coaches along the way that you picked to follow and learn from, how did you pick that coach or mentor?
For me, I've never really had those mentors in my life. I had a dad who did the best that he could, but he sucked at it. He did a pretty good job of modeling. He grew up in a trailer park where he had to duct tape his trailer together. Wow. Sold drugs, had to fight to get back across the railroad tracks almost every day. But, he worked incredibly hard and became a very successful eye surgeon. So I had a unique upbringing of, being incredibly poor, and then, being somewhat well off. And I can vividly remember dreaming about Happy Meals whenever I was 6-7 years old, not really ever getting a new pair of clothes, everything being hand-me-downs until the time I was 12 or 13. But then by the time I was 18, my parents were able to afford to pay for the rest of my education at Vanderbilt when I had a 10% soccer scholarship. So it definitely didn't come from there. My mom and I are very close, and she's played some of that role. And I've definitely had people at different times that have been helpful and useful mentors, but the biggest place where I've always gleaned wisdom and mentorship is from books. And that's probably why I'm, I don't love writing, but probably why I was, more willing to write 6 books, because I think that there's just something about a book that is really helpful and that lives on, possibly in the world that we're living through now, for the foreseeable future, that a book can outlive even the person that wrote it. And so, yeah, for me, it's mainly been books. That's where, there's no ego involved. There's no, it doesn't necessarily matter how somebody says something. And so sometimes I can get hung up on, the the way somebody is trying to teach me something or how I feel about them, but there's just something unique with a book that's everything is kind of stripped away, and you can kind of just take it for what it is. And it's kind of on that same note, there's lots of people when I go on the road, which is not very often anymore, but people will tell me, I love your books, but I really don't like you. and that's one of the beautiful things about books, is that can happen. And that those people will still probably, if I haven't, offended them too bad, which you never know, but that they can still gain value and wisdom and have that form of me as a mentor in their life, even though they don't actually like me. And so that's the way that I've predominantly gained wisdom for my life, is through reading and studying books.
Love it. Perfect. So when I was reading the books, I was wondering, because the sensei and Russ and all these characters in the book, for those of you that don't know what we're talking about, chop wood, carry water, pound the stone, I'm reading through all of the 6 books that he's talking about. I'm a big fan. But, you would think that there would have been somebody who had set that expectation for you. But it sounds like you kind of set those goals for yourself, found the books to read, and pushed through that. But something else I took away from your book, and I've only been in your apartment, 20 minutes max, and there's a mental toughness in you. I've watched some of your podcasts. You talk about sports, having that mental toughness. It sounds like you pushed through poverty to do okay for yourself. You've pushed through getting the last one picked. You've pushed through, getting the best grades. What is that mental toughness like for you? Where does it come from? Because people talk to us all the time about, in coaching, it's hard for me to push through, or I'm dealing with adversity, or how do I overcome that? Something in you is different. Where does that come from? Where's that mental toughness come from?
Good question. I'll answer a little bit of what you didn't ask. So about the mentors, the one thing. So if you look at the way that I wrote Chop Wood, Carry Water, or Pound the Stone, I've been that person in Eric Sheets's life. He was the first kid that I trained whenever I was living in the closet of the gym. Then Naira Fields, who was played on our team at UCLA for 4 years, and I was like her big brother. She's like my little sister, and in that relationship of mentoring them and taking a lot of the lessons that I had both learned in my life and imparted upon them, and a lot of the challenges in the day-to-day of actually applying everything. So that's a lot of where that narrative in those relationships come from. And then even Russ is that name comes from a guy named Russ Pillar, who has served as somewhat of that role in my life. But anytime I've ever tried to call him a mentor, he laughs at me and says stop. But yeah, so that's that. When it comes to mental toughness, I don't know. I think that in certain ways that a little bit of that is just hardwired into me. In the last 6 or 7 weeks, I've been wrestling through a new kind of development in my life, which one of my friends came to me and said, hey, I think that you should take this Asperger's autism spectrum test. And I scored a 33 and a 32, taking it with 2 of my best friends that have been in my life for a significant amount of time, and talking through the answers with them. And if you're in that, I think it was 31 to 34 range, it's possible that you're on the autism spectrum. And so it's been interesting actually processing through that and processing through some of okay, well, maybe some of the things that I thought were choices that I was making, or that I had developed this mental toughness that might just be kind of hardwired into me. That I've always known that I'm different for sure, but there's certain ways that I think that people would, the characteristics that they would describe in terms of the way they define mental toughness, a lot of those I've had in me from a very young age. And so I want to be kind of careful and cognizant of the fact that it feels good sometimes to think that we've made choices and that we're doing something, but that sometimes there's just there's DNA, there's environmental factors and things like that play into some of those things. Now, the way that we define true mental toughness in Chop Wood, Carry Water and in a lot of our work is a little bit different than how most people define mental toughness. And the way we define true mental toughness is having a great attitude, giving your very, very best, treating people really, really well, having unconditional gratitude, regardless of your circumstances. And the thing I love about the way that we define it there is that that's about as 100% controllable as it gets. And it's one of those things that if you're focused on true mental toughness instead of arbitrary based outcomes, then everything in life almost becomes a win-win proposition. Because if you get the sale, if you get the win, then great. You still haven't sacrificed putting first things first. But if you don't get the thing that you want, but you've still been focused on this, then that means you're going to have developed more true mental toughness, which every single person wants somebody on their team, whether that's a spouse, whether that's a friend, whether that's a boss or an employee. Everybody wants somebody on their team that embodies the characteristics of true mental toughness. And so all of a sudden we can take back the kind of transformational power that exists inside of whether it's sports or business or different endeavors that we might be embarking upon if we're focused on putting more of those first things first instead of being focused on the outcomes, and then it becomes more of that zero-sum game. And so that's more what I care about than like, yes, I'm a very driven person. Yes, I'm wired a little bit differently. This is something that actually matters, and it's something that we don't focus on that much anymore. We become so consumed with outcomes that it makes it really hard. We think that that's soft talk to focus on actually putting first things first. But I do believe, like C.S. Lewis said, that if you'll put first things first, secondary things aren't suppressed, they increase. But that's just really hard in a society that, based off of these things
right.
and technology, we're so being pushed to put secondary things first all the time.
Right. Agreed. Well, I am sitting with you in your beautiful condo. I'm overlooking the water, the gorgeous skyline. You've got a pretty great life. In your 30s-ish. I know, kind of retired. Mm-hmm. Told me earlier, I play golf every day. I would love to have that life sometime. There's a lot of people watching this that are going to say, dang, how did he get there so fast? What was his secret sauce, if you will? How do I speed up the transaction, me included? How do I get to retire a little faster and enjoy my life? I know you've got a lot of career left in you, but I don't know what your future looks like. But tell us how you got here so quickly. Was it a mindset that, hey, I want to get in, get it done, I want to retire? Is it, I want to retire from this career and go to something else? I don't think there's any envy on my part, but if you've got the secret to how to get there a little bit faster after I get another kid through college, and I'm open to what that looks like.
I don't know that there's many secrets. I also don't know that it happened that fast. Mm-hmm. I also don't know how great my life is. I think that it depends on what you want out of life and what you're willing to put in. I oftentimes ask people or tell people, I'm not interested in your dreams. I'm not interested in what you want. I'm more interested in one question: how much are you willing to suffer? And how much are you willing to sacrifice? And so yeah, there are certain aspects of my life, if you look at financially, if you look at professionally, I've beat a lot of people.
Sure.
When it comes to that. But if you look at some other areas they've kind of been sacrificed in that process, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. But I think that that's always what you always have to kind of count the cost. And so if I'm being really honest, that's why I'm processing through a lot of things like retirement and not working anymore. Not because I have some big nest egg tucked away and things like that, but I have, I've created enough value that I know that Chop Wood, Carry Water, and Pound the Stone in particular are going to generate a pretty significant monthly royalty for me for probably the rest of my life. But I think that what I'm really having to take a look around and go, okay, so socially, relationally, from a community perspective, how are those areas of my life? And I think that a lot of those areas got somewhat sacrificed because on birthdays and just lots of other, with friends. I had a girlfriend one time where I was in, Dr. Jerry Buss's box at the Lakers game, and I left at halftime because I was tired of watching other people live life, and went to finish building the first mental training app in the world for basketball. And so there were a lot of sacrifices that were made, and now at 34, I'm going, okay, professionally, I'm probably good. My cousin was just kind of arguing with me on the phone a little bit before you got here about, you just got to be careful. And I'm like, no, I could stop writing and speaking for 5 years, and I truly believe I could step right back into it and would have many of the exact same opportunities as I do today. Maybe I'm wrong, but my track record on those things has been pretty good about understanding the marketplace, and so I think I would be just fine. But what I'm more interested in is like, okay, how do I spend the same amount of time and intentionality around building community in San Diego, potentially finding a wife and getting married and having a family as I have in my professional career. And I don't want to, watching my dad's life and watching him, do so many amazing things professionally, but then at 49 get diagnosed with terminal cancer, and it start to change all the priorities in his life. Right. And so I have never wanted to get to that point. And so I just went on a trip for the first time in probably 3 months to go speak just this last week. And it was the first time when I asked myself that question: if I got diagnosed with terminal cancer and I had a year to live, would I have gone on this trip? And almost always it's been yes, 100%. And it's the first time where I was like, I don't know if I would have gone on this trip. And it's hard because the money to speak is dumb money. It's funny money. But it's like, if you wouldn't do it if you knew that you had terminal cancer, I don't know. And so I really am trying to wrestle through a lot of that. But going back to the quickly part of it, I spent 10 years with my head down and living with my mom. I chose to skip scholarships to law school to move into a homeless shelter, and served in a homeless shelter for 6 months. I moved from there into the closet of a gym and lived in the closet of a gym for 9 months, and was going into the toughest housing project in the country to serve. For basically 7 of those years, I was making no money. And most people thought that I was crazy. I skipped writing my master's thesis at Duke. Could have had my master's from Duke, and never in my gut, I just always felt like the Holy Spirit was like, nah, that's not what you're supposed to do. And so I didn't write my master's thesis. Everybody told me that I was crazy along the way, and now all of a sudden people, kind of think that I'm a little bit of a genius. And it's like, okay, I didn't really believe you when you thought I was crazy, and I'm not sure I really believe you when you think that I'm a genius. But it definitely didn't happen quick. It didn't feel quick. It actually felt really long, because 12 to 15 hour days for 8 to 10 years is a long time. And so once again, anytime somebody makes something look easy, we always tell our clients, especially in the sports realm and with professional athletes, anytime somebody makes something look easy, you just haven't seen all the work that's gone in the dark. And that goes down to LeBron. And I think LeBron is one of the most physically gifted people we've ever seen. But the real jumps in his career didn't start happening, in my opinion, until he started understanding the work in the dark and beating on your craft. And when that gear shifted, then it was like, okay, he's been taken to a completely different level. And it's always that work in the dark. And so yeah.
Perfect. All right, so as we wrap this up, I heard words like surrender. I heard words like doing the work in the dark. I heard gratitude. I heard community. All of which words that we use in our coaching world, if you will. We talk about being grateful and gracious and showing a ton of gratitude, which I love that you touched on that. As we wind down, you've given us so much great information. I could sit here for 2 more hours. I don't know I could keep everybody's attention 2 more hours, but how would you wrap this up for us, knowing that this is going to be watched by realtors and lenders, top 1% around the country, living the grind, doing the work in the dark, expressing the gratitude every chance they get, surrendering. A lot of our students surrender time with their family, and we really try to work on work-life balance, working on their money, on their business, on their spirituality. We try to coach the whole person, if you will, and you've talked a lot about that today. How do we wrap this up? What kind of advice could you give us as we wind down and say, hey, here's a few things that may help you, or here's some things I would suggest? How do we wrap this up?
Probably my biggest advice to people in that position would be, how much is enough? How much is enough? Because most of the time when it comes to high performers, comes to high income earners, there's no limit. There's no ceiling. There's no stopping point. And it's why, like, if there's one thing that I've kind of proud of myself for lately, it's for taking a step back and really going, how much do I need? Like, do I need to just keep grinding? Do I need to just, and you can justify it so easily, right? You can go, oh, well, you can impact so many more people. Yeah, okay, sure. And you can, and that's true. But at some point, again, it's at what cost? So if you have a family and you have other things in your life, it's how much is enough? Like, how many cars do we need? How many houses do we need? How much do we need? And how much do we really need? And do our kids need more experiences? Do our kids need more stuff? Or do our kids need more of our best time and our best energy and our best love? And that's kind of my challenge, is like, or just at least own it. Mm-hmm. Like, own that it's your ego and it's not your kids, it's not something else, but like, own, like, this is for my ego and to show off to other people.
Right.
And if you want to own that, then great. But just like, I don't know, I'm kind of a no bullshit person, and it's like, don't tell me that it's for your kids, because your kids want more of your time, your energy, and your love, and that's really what they need, and that's what they want. And then sometimes what ends up happening, though, and what I have parents tell me as well, now my kids don't, my kids are at the age where they don't want that anymore. And it's like, okay, but do you know where that came from? Because when they were little, you didn't give it to them. You gave them stuff. And now they're addicted to stuff. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know. It's just like, how many more of us have to get diagnosed with terminal cancer for us to say, enough is enough? Like, I'm going to start putting first things first. I'm going to start spending time where it really matters. And so, yeah, how much is enough, and what do I really want to be remembered for? And that question of, if you only had 1 or 2 years to live, what would you do? And if you start to operate from that place, most of the time, we don't need very much. And yeah, like we're at my really cool apartment and it's beautiful, and yes, I have a Range Rover downstairs, and you know, I've got a lot of really cool stuff. But the funny thing is, like, when I was living in the closet of the gym, whenever I was living in the homeless shelter, when I was living with my mom, I operated the exact same way. I can be content with little, or I can be content with much. And I've demonstrated that over and over and over again. But you don't actually need that much. And believing that, like in Chopwood Carrywater with Kobe Bryant, and I have immense amounts of respect for Kobe's work ethic and things like that. But that whole, like, I'll retire when I get the 6th one. If the first 5 didn't do it, what do you think the 6th one is going to do?
Right.
If 250,000 didn't do it, if 1 million didn't do it, if 2 million didn't do it, another million, another 5 million, another 10 million isn't going to do it.
Right.
And so how much is enough? And I think honestly, a lot of us are scared, and like this is the stuff that I'm wrestling through, of when you strip away some of that stuff and that activity of just grinding to grind, that all of a sudden it's like, then you have to deal with real stuff, like real interpersonal stuff that oftentimes we can hide behind our high achievement and our high performance. And that's where honestly a lot of the real work begins, because when you strip it all away, and like if you just had to sit with yourself and you couldn't go out and work,
yeah,
that's gonna be hard for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite exercises from a book called The Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks is when he asked the kids at Duke that he was mentoring to go sit in the chapel at Duke for 5 minutes and just be silent. He's like, you don't have to pray, you don't have to do, just go be silent in the chapel for 5 minutes. And 2 or 3 weeks go by, and not one of the kids does it. And the chapel, if you've been to Durham, is right in the middle of campus. And it's just so crazy because none of them do it. And then one of them finally says, why can't we do this? And the one girl says, I don't know about you guys, but I know that I'm afraid that if I stop, I'll actually wonder what I'm actually doing with my life. And that's what I find a lot of times, is that if we'll stop and we get really quiet and it's like, oh shoot, and we get to hide behind performance. So
that's great. Well, I'm a better person for spending an hour with you today. Super humbled that you would take this time. He's super humble. I'll be honest with you, one of the things we love about you, the partners in the company that I work with, is that your books were self-published. There was nothing in there about you. And so our owner has written his book, and he's like, this guy's super humble. He doesn't even talk about himself in the book. So
well, you haven't read Burn Your Goals. You haven't read Transformational Leadership. You haven't read Hustle, because all of those have a ton of personal stories.
Good. Well, I'm excited to learn more about you, because this time has been great. And I hope this is not our last time to put you on our podcast, because our folks in Coronation are going to be totally inspired by you and learn a lot. So thank you so much for your time today. If you're in the market for a coach, please visit us on the web at thecoretraining.com or give us a call at the office, 1-800-660-6670. Thanks again, Joshua.
Thanks for having me.